Okay, so there's going to be a range of listeners on the show. I'm not worried about the people who are understanding how to balance their fiat versus Bitcoin. I think they get it, and they're going to get a lot out of this show just because you bring so much to the table, Lim. But there are going to be some people, I really hope there's some people here who only hold dollars or only hold pounds and are starting to think about this. And it's interesting when you start to consider the different uses of money, taken straight from the article, the use to consume, save, invest, and share. Personally, running through this, majority of my consumption is with my traditional pound bank account. I use my card and I pay for things, or I withdraw cash and I pay for things. But when we come to saving, whilst I have a small amount in pound, I don't tend to save too much in pounds. It's the money I tend to put away for the next year. But anything long term is going into Bitcoin, because I know long term that's where I feel that's a better place to save money. Investing is kind of interesting because certain things I'm investing in. Football club, for example, that's an investment of pounds. I've just taken from savings and put that into that. But I can see scenarios where I'd invest Bitcoin into Bitcoin companies. And then when we talk about sharing, actually the majority of my sharing is actually Bitcoin. Because that's appreciated so well, and there's so many projects that accept Bitcoin and they accept internationally. I've actually been doing that. But I think it's interesting to start to consider, I actually need different monies for different purposes. Can you run through this and why you did this breakdown? Because it's actually the first time I've seen somebody do this, and it's made me think about money in a different way.
Yeah, I think during monetary transitions, that becomes very common to use multiple types of money.
Yep.
Like you were saying in Venezuela, for example, there's like 5 common types of money, and that's because they're going through a very difficult time. It's kind of like the more stability there is, the less need there is for multiple types of money. And when you have all these imperfections with different types of money, or at least imperfections as part of their journey. So for example, Bitcoin's imperfection, we can call it, is the volatility. But you're early on and that volatility is inevitable, right? So whatever the type of money might be, there's going to be like a downside to it. And so they kind of use that for the things that it solves and use another type of money for the things that solves. And so when you go back to what we can do with our assets, right? So if we have a surplus of what we generate versus what we do, we can either, one, we can just consume it. We can just, use it up in various ways, discretionary. 2, we can save it. And the whole point of savings is something that you expect to not be super volatile, but that of course is different time frames. So you might want to save for something 6 months from now, and you need to have pretty low volatility for that. If you're saving up for a down payment on a house, for example, compared to something, if you're saving multi-year, you're willing to accept more volatility, but you still want it to be pretty much a sure thing. You want it to not lose value significantly over the longer term.
So hold on 1 second. My Bitcoin is both this saving and investment.
That's currently where it is in this transition, right? Because it's a more volatile money, and because it's earlier on in its monetization process, it kind of blends the category between savings and investment. And I think it's also partially, the more knowledgeable someone gets on it, they might start putting it more in the savings camp. Whereas people that are approaching it for the first time really think about it in the investment camp. But really it has aspects of both, right? Because it's this 13-year-old asset that's monetizing. And when you hold Bitcoin, you're making an assessment of its properties relative to others, kind of like how you would an investment. If I buy one stock over another stock, I'm making an assessment of its properties and saying I want to own stock A and not stock B. Same thing with Bitcoin. I'm looking at the properties and saying, okay, it's not something I want to hold if I have a 6-week, if I'm going to buy for something in 6 weeks, right? I'm not going to store it in Bitcoin, but it's something I want to hold if I want to, make a expectation about what's going to happen 5 years from now.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the sharing bit, because I definitely didn't think about that as a separate area. If you just said, "What do I do with money?" I'd be saying, "Well, yeah, I buy stuff with it, and yes, I save with it, and I certainly invest with money." But I never would have thought about sharing as an important separate category.
Yeah, it's its own thing I like to characterize that as essentially investing in your community, right? So it's another, you can kind of put it in the investment category, but it's a very different type because you're not trying to invest specifically for yourself. I think a lot of us are, we're wired to want to help the community around us. That's kind of how we survived as a species. We're not like these like isolated, our social interactions are a key part of what makes us human. And so sharing is a key part of kind of investing in our community and just helping other people. And so when you have some sort of surplus, you can consume, you can save, you can invest, you can share. And there can be different types of monies or different types of assets, even if you're talking about investment in non-monies, like things like stocks or companies or real estate, that serve those purposes differently. And ideally, in the long run, I mean, you'd have one money that can do it all, right? I mean, maybe, Bitcoin after 25 years can check off more boxes than it can check off now. Right now, it can check off a bunch. And the longer it goes on, it might be able to increase the number of boxes that it can check off in terms of someone's finances.
Yeah, it's funny you consider it there as an investment in your community. I was talking to Danny about it beforehand. I actually thought of sharing as more like consumption, in that I am choosing, because I have a choice to spend it on myself or to give it to somebody else. And when you give it to somebody else, you have that kind of feeling, that good feeling, like you're helping other people. So I actually also considered it as consumption as well.
I agree. No, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.